Okay, well, it is 3 o'clock, so I think we'll go ahead and get started. I know everyone's time is very valuable. You probably all have many more important things to do today than listen to me talk for an hour and a half. So hopefully it doesn't take us that long. We will go as long as we need to go to cover the content and allow for any questions to be asked. So let's just dive right into it. Hopefully you meant to be at onboarding and orientation for new chief elected officials. If you didn't mean to be here, you probably are in the wrong Zoom meeting. If you want to go ahead and introduce yourselves by using the chat box, you can enter your name, the county, and the local workforce development area that you're here to represent. I don't have my camera on, but I will show you very briefly this terrible photo of myself. My name is Michelle McNertney. I am the Division Administrator of Workforce Services at IWD. And it is my team and I that are responsible for administrating several federal and state workforce programs under the purview of IWD, which includes the WIOA programs that we're going to be talking about today. So I don't have my camera on because it's difficult to do that and present at the same time, so I apologize. But thank you all for coming and welcome. So today we are going to talk about a couple of different things. And really what we're here to do is give you all, as either newly elected or newly appointed chief elected officials, foundational knowledge for how you are a part of the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act legislation, the governance of that in your local area, how this federal legislation and programming can be used for economic and community development in your area, and just to understand your foundational role in the workforce system in your area. So those are the topics that we're going to cover today. Oops, I'm sorry, I got to get rid of this chat box. I am also joined by Lori Collins, who, if you were on early, you heard me chatting with her. She is actually from Kentucky, and she's in Kentucky right now with those beautiful horses, maybe or maybe not. But she works for a company called Mayer & Mayer, which is a national consulting firm used by the U.S. Department of Labor and contracted by IWD to help us ensure WIOA compliance. So Lori's here to assist with me today as we go through this and help answer any questions. So just so you're aware, specific agenda of what we're going to talk about. Again, we're going to go with a high-level overview of what the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, or WIOA, is, including requirements of the governance structure, which is what CEOs are a part of. We'll explain the key tasks of CEOs and also provide you a host of tools and resources to use for you to be successful in your role. We will be stopping and pausing to answer questions at multiple spots throughout the presentation today, but this is pretty informal. So at any time, if you want, you can unmute yourself and ask questions. You can also type questions into the chat box and we'll answer those as we go throughout the presentation as well. And then we will also outline what you can expect next. So another thing, if you wouldn't mind just chatting in the chat box so that we have an idea, is with the newly appointed or elected chief elected officials, how would you rate your knowledge of your role as a CEO in the local system? Do you know what's going on? You're just here for a refresher. You maybe know enough to be dangerous, or this is pretty brand new to you and you're really willing to learn and hope you could learn more. So if you wouldn't mind chatting that in, that will also help us sort of gauge our audience today. So before I dive in, does anybody have any questions? All right, well, let's dig into it. So before we dive into the information, just a couple of commonly used acronyms, because as you know, this is government and we have to use a whole host of letters to define what we're doing and confuse everybody. So these are some important acronyms that we'll use. Again, CEO stands for Chief Elected Official. That's what you are, and that's why you're here. Each local workforce development area also has what we deem a Chief Lead Elected Official, or a CLEO. IWD is representing Iowa Workforce Development. Each local area also has a local workforce development board. LWDB often is what you'll see. Again, we'll say local workforce development area, local area, LWDA kind of interchangeably. U.S. Department of Labor, which is the federal entity that has oversight over the programs we're discussing. And then again, WIOA for the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. You'll also hear it referred to as WIOA pretty interchangeably. So lots of acronyms for you all to get used to. So with chief elected officials, WIOA identifies a key role which exists at the county level. And the act refers to that person as a chief elected official. So every state in the country has chief elected officials. And in Iowa, the chief elected official is defined as the chair of the County Board of Supervisors or a designee from within the County Board of Supervisors. So with that, each county in Iowa has one CEO that represents them for this portion of your work. Because I know, as I've learned over the past couple of years working closely with your peers, that you all are very busy and probably have 7 or 8 or 9 other subject matter areas that you're in charge of in your role as County Board of Supervisors as well. So, you know, in order to ensure equality across the state, each county again has one, and it has to be a member of the County Board of Supervisors. So those, let me see, keep going. Oh, I'm sorry, I skipped a part. So, and the role of that chief elected official is really the foundation for the workforce system in the local area. And the CEOs really set the foundation for the local board. We'll find out more about that a little later on. And really is designed to work with that local board to ensure that workforce programming is strategic, that there's fiscal integrity, and that you are ensuring the local area is represented by committed and suitable local board members. So that's really a key role for you all as chief elected officials. And we'll dive into, again, more specifics of that later on. Just in case you haven't seen this map yet, this is a map of the state and how the local areas are divided. So WIOA requires and defines that there are local workforce development areas in the state. These areas serve as the basis for how workforce development funds are passed from the state to the local level and how workforce related services are provided to Iowans. So we have, again, 9 local workforce development areas, or LWDAs, in Iowa. And these 9 areas are the basis for how funding flows and how governance happens. So if you are from, say, Scott County, then you are a CEO of the Mississippi Valley Local Workforce Development Area, and the other 7 counties that comprise the Mississippi Valley and yourself will work together to set that foundation in your area. So let's figure out, what is WIOA? So again, WIOA, or the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, was enacted on July 22nd, 2014. It's federal legislation that is designed to help job seekers access employment, education, training, and supportive services to succeed in the labor market, and to match employers with the skilled workers they need to compete in the global economy. So it is designed to be governed at a local level by a private sector-led board. This is an act that was passed by a wide bipartisan majority, and it was the first legislative reform in over 15 years at that point in time when it was passed. So WIOA outlines the vision, goals, objectives, and requirements for how the public workforce system is structured and operates. If you could just make sure that you're on mute, that would be great. Thank you.
I am mute.
And it also brings together in strategic coordination the core programs of the federal investment and skill development. So let's look at the next slide that will kind of help explain that. So when we talk about WIOA, we're actually talking about several programs underneath this federal legislation, what I like to think about as an umbrella, right? So WIOA has 4 core programs that you'll often hear us talking about. So the first program is Title I, which covers adult, dislocated worker, and youth programming. Then we have Title II, which is adult education and literacy. So typically that's where you're helping to have people get their GED or their high school equivalency. A lot of work around people that need help with English as a second language and civics education. All of that rolls up into Title II. Title III, or also known as the Wagner-Peiser Act, is employment services. So this is really that match between employers and job seekers and helping them find a fit and making those connections. And then Title IV is vocational rehabilitation services. So the overarching federal legislation of WIOA and it reaches over all of these programs, and these core programs are required by that law to work collaboratively with other workforce system programs and partners to provide those needed services for businesses and job seeking customers. And so just so you know, when we start talking later about the funding and the oversight that you all have as chief elected officials, we're talking about the overall workforce system in your local area. When it comes to funding, the Title I funds are the funds that are passed through IWD to the local areas directly that you have oversight and responsibility for. So WIOA, again, is really the foundation of a state's workforce system. And as a foundation, there are some key principles upon which the system is to be laid. And those principles are really defined in the law. So the first one is integrated service delivery. So again, if we think back to that umbrella, those are just the 4 core programs, but there are many other programs that are also tasked with workforce development. And all of those programs within the system are really required to work collaboratively to serve those 2 main customers of the system, which are your employer or your business customer and your individual or the job seeking customer. So programs that provide workforce services are considered partner programs. And the idea here is that programs don't duplicate each other, but instead work collaboratively to deliver the best outcome for the customer. So while Title I program might pay for somebody to receive education and training, the Title IV program might pay for that same person who has a disability to receive some assistive technology to help them be able to complete that training or become employed or things like that. So just one quick example of how those programs are supposed to integrate and offer what's often referenced wraparound services for a customer. The next key principle is to focus on strategy. So this element is critical to the local board, which is appointed by you as CEOs. The local board should be focused on the big picture of workforce development and strategies to ensure that the supply side, which is the workforce system, is meeting the demand side of the employers and the business community. So CEOs lay out the groundwork for the board to focus on that strategy by appointing members to your board and things like that. And we'll get into more specific detail later on. The next principle is regional economic development. So meeting workforce needs is critical to economic growth. State and local workforce development boards, in partnership with workforce economic development, education, and social services organizations at the state and local levels, align education and training investments to, sorry, I just lost my spot, and training investments to regional civic and economic growth strategies, ensuring that all job seekers and businesses can access pathways to prosperity. Additionally, you want to focus on high quality services. So the system has to be focused on that. And to do this, the stakeholders have to increase coordination of programs and resources to support a comprehensive system that seamlessly provides these integrated services. And I think you all know, being in your roles as board members, is that funds are ever shrinking, right? We're always all asked to do more with less. And that's no different when we're talking about federally funded programs. So the more integrated service delivery, the more quality of services, the more those funds stretch and the more people that can be served. So another just key principle. And then finally, you have high quality services going right along with an evaluative process to determine service excellence. So you really want to focus on accountability and transparency by using data to make decisions and continuously evaluating the performance standards that are used in your area to assign those services. This means making purposeful decisions about the system and how it will operate, as well as operating within open meetings laws and abiding by procuring service providers. So when the system is built upon those 5 principles, The outputs of the systems will be what the U.S. Department of Labor references as the hallmarks of excellence. And you can see on the screen that the hallmarks of excellence is that number one, businesses and job seekers drive the workforce solutions, right? And as we get into this a little bit later on, you'll understand that making sure that you have the customers driving the solutions will ensure that the right solutions and the right services are being provided to meet their needs and therefore make those that progress. Additionally, you have excellent customer service and focus on continuous improvement, and then strong regional economies and activity in community and workforce development. So using those principles to drive the decisions and set that foundation hopefully leads to these outcomes. So WIOA envisions a workforce system that is quality focused, employer driven, customer centered, and tailored to meet the needs of regional economies. The vision is one of collaboration and customer focus, with business driving the system's agenda and range of services. This vision is embodied in the 3 hallmarks of excellence. And again, when we're talking about business driving the system's agenda, for example, if you are in, I don't know, Northeast Iowa, and advanced manufacturing is one of the main industries, but the workforce system is providing training in wind energy, which is not a main driver of the economy in Northeast Iowa, then that's probably not a good fit, right? So you bring the businesses of the area to the table, you let them lead their needs and put those needs out there, and you really design services around those needs, and therefore you're providing education and training and services in the areas that the businesses need. They then have a workforce readily available to fill their needs, and it sort of cycles like that, right? And that's just a quick high-level example of what we mean when we talk about business-led. So in Iowa, the public workforce system is essential to achieving that vision. And the network of federally funded programs focuses on employment and training services. It's a primary tool to develop the talent pipeline needed in Iowa to grow the economy and ensure prosperity and vitality for all. And so a major part of that overall workforce system are the Iowa Work Centers. This is a logo for the Iowa Work Centers. You may be familiar with it, you may be not. Sometimes these centers are referred to as the American Job Centers or AJCs. Sometimes they're referred to as the One-Stop Center. And honestly, some people still refer to them as the IWD offices, right? They're all talking about the same location. And there are 15 comprehensive workforce center, or Iowa Work Centers across the state. Every one of the 9 local workforce development areas has at least one. A couple have several. And this is really that office where these programs and services should be offered. Whoops, I'm going too fast. Let's see here. Okay. So the Iowa Works network of funding, Iowa Works system is really that network of federally funded programs that should be working together. So we go back and we talk about the Title I program, which offers education and training services for adult dislocated worker and youth. Title II, adult education and literacy. Title III, Wagner-Pfizer. Title IV, VR. You also have programs like, let me think about it, Lori, think like the food assistance has an employment and training program. That's part of the workforce system. The unemployment system is part of the workforce system. There are many other programs that are included in that workforce system. But some of those services that should be offered for unemployed, underemployed, and youth that can be offered through these systems are on the screen. So we're talking about enrolling people into programs and providing them case management, helping them navigate the system, helping them achieve their goals, providing assessments to them to help them understand what they need to do to achieve those goals, teaching them the soft skills that they need. So it's not just about learning how to become a welder, but what other skills do you need to successfully have a career in welding? How do you even get the job? Practice resume writing, job search techniques, interviewing techniques, all of those things. And then the actual training, the job search and placement. Again, I've graduated training with a degree in welding. Now I need to find a job. So the workforce system can help me match me to an employer who's looking for a welder, all of those things. are services that are offered through the workforce system. And that might be the services for the job seeker side, but you have to remember the second customer, which is the business side. So we should also be working on serving a business through the life cycle of their business, right? So posting jobs for them, referring customers, designing training specifically for the jobs that they have on hand in their business that they need help with. On the job trainings, incumbent work to train, there's a whole host of ways that businesses can receive services through the Iowa work system as well. So this next slide really gives us an oversight of what that governance structure looks like, which is what chief elected officials are part of. And so WIOA requires this formal governance structure, and they clearly define the roles that you see here on the screen. So this graphic really lays that structure out. It shows how the funding flows and how the oversight flows from the federal level all the way down to the local level. And so what you have at the very top, again, is the United States Department of Labor. So they are issuing the funds to the governor. So the governor is our grant recipient of the state. And then the governor appoints a state workforce agency to really technically receive those funds and provide oversight of those funds for her. And that's the state workforce agency, which in Iowa is Iowa Workforce Development. Along those same lines, every state has what's called a state workforce development board, which is a board that has a very similar structure to the local workforce development boards. We'll get into detail here in a minute, but they're appointed by the governor, and they really should be providing consultation and guidance to the governor and setting the stage for what the overall workforce system in the state is designed to be. And then the local level workforce systems have to fit within that state requirement. So from the state workforce agency, there you see yourself kind of right smack in the middle are the chief elected officials. And so technically we at IWD will pass through funding to the local area via the CEOs and the local workforce development board, who most often will appoint a fiscal agent to receive those funds for them and do the physical financial work on their behalf. And then the CEOs, again, are in charge of and responsible for appointing a local workforce development board that can actually kind of do the heavy lifting for you all. And we'll get into that in a little bit as well. And you can also see then there's a line between the state workforce development board and the local workforce development board. So again, the state workforce development board is going to set the overall vision, and the local workforce development board will set a local vision within the parameters that was set by the state board. So, any questions so far? Keep going. I'm going to dive in a little bit to each one of those levels. So the first level, again, that I mentioned is the Department of Labor. So in the Department of Labor is the Employment and Training Administration. They are the administration that's overseeing the funds that they grant out to the states. They conduct monitoring and oversight and provide technical assistance to the states. And at the federal level, Department of Labor is divided into 6 regional offices. Iowa is a part of the Region 5 office, which is run out of the Chicago area. And we are one of 10 states in Region 5, which is basically sort of the Midwestern states, right? The next level down in that chart was, again, the governor, who's going to receive the funds. She designates the state workforce development board, and she designates the state workforce development agency. And then we have the state workforce development board. So again, as I've been saying, their responsibilities are to set that statewide vision, to ensure that there's continuous improvement, and to make sure that the correct businesses and stakeholders are being engaged at a statewide level to achieve that vision. The membership of the state board, again, and I mentioned this, and in the local board are very similar, and this is defined by the law at a federal level. So if you'll notice that the membership of the state board is a minimum 51% business. So again, everything we've talked about to this date, this point, is the fact that the workforce system should be business-led, and the membership requirements of the state and board and local boards mimics that. So you have a board that's 51% business. You also have a high representation of labor organizations and workforce representatives on that board. There are state agencies represented on the board. There are elected officials, both from the state and the local level, and community-based organizations. So all the entities and stakeholders at play in helping to shape that workforce system at a statewide level. State Workforce Agency, again, which is Iowa Workforce Development, is really in charge of overseeing the administrative functions on behalf of the governor for the state and the local system. So again, my team and this department are really in charge of and will be issuing policies to the system. We convene the partners to ensure that there is collaboration at a statewide level as well as just the local level. We monitor for compliance. We're in charge of performance reporting for all of the programs back up to the federal government and everything like that that's involved with compliance and reporting. And then we also will execute the contracts between the state and the local workforce development area for those WIOA funds that I mentioned earlier. Okay, and now to you guys. And I know that so far this has been an overview, but I promise we're going to get into the specifics of what CEOs do. So as chief elected officials, so you represent, again, a key component of that local level of the workforce system. And I think I mentioned this already, but I'll just repeat it. So every county in Iowa has one chief elected official for the purposes of the WIOA legislation. And the group of chief elected officials work together based on their local workforce development area. So again, I think I already gave this example, but if you're the CEO from Scott County, yourself and the 7 other counties that represent the Mississippi Valley will work together as the chief elected officials for the Mississippi Valley local workforce development area. Typically what you will do as a group of chief elected officials is designate one person from amongst yourselves to operate as the chief lead elected official. And really all that does is act as sort of a figurehead for the CLEO, or the chief lead elected official will convene the group. They'll be the one to probably receive and share out information, and they'll sign documents on behalf of the group as well as a few other tasks. But it's really, again, just that representative of the entire group, the chief lead elected official. And you do have liability for the Title I funds. So I know that there are a couple of veterans on here. Jack, I could see you, Dawn. This is the area of the discussion that kind of got us all paying attention the last time we did CEO training, right? So we will get into that a little bit more later on, but that is why your involvement is so important, because ultimately the liability and the correct use of funds does fall to the chief elected officials. Again, then the next part of the local governance structure is that local workforce development board. And you can see again that a little bit of the membership requirement has the same membership requirements as the state board. So it's going to be 51% business by law at a minimum. The same state workforce agency, well, I'm sorry, not state workforce agencies necessarily, but workforce agencies represented, or workforce programs represented, community-based organizations and things like that. And so once the chief elected officials work together to set the expectations and things like that and appoint the local board really oversees the system and decides how the funds will be spent in the local area. They are also in charge of selecting organizations or providers of to be service providers within their local area. And they will develop the strategic plans. They will set budgets and convene partners and really make those data-driven decisions. A lot of those tasks, they do need to receive final approval from the chief elected officials, yourselves, but it's really the local board that's tasked with accomplishing those things under the law.
Hey, Michelle.
Yeah.
We had a question in the chat, and okay. I answered it a little bit, but I want to pose it to you to see if there's anything you want to add. So the question is, are the workforce programs solely funded by federal grants? If so, what happens when funding is cut? Does the state or local areas have to backfill those funds?
Wow, that's a really great question. And I feel like I'm playing a game to see if I'm going to get the answer right, because I can't see what you wrote. I hope I don't.
Let me just tell you what I wrote.
Sure.
So I said the programs covered by the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act are all federal. However, states are able to provide general fund dollars to support the statewide system. You all are fortunate in Iowa. Your legislature gives a lot of funding to various workforce development programs throughout the state. That doesn't happen in every state, by the way. But there is not a requirement, should there be a reduction in funds, there is not a requirement that states or local governments have to backfill. But I will say it's great if that can happen, but there's not a requirement.
Absolutely. And I would agree with everything that Lori said. I would also point out that, once these local areas are truly up and running and you have a board that is fully functioning, which you all do, which is awesome, there is nothing stopping a local board or a local area from seeking additional funding from other sources, whether public or private. So, you can fund this till your heart's content. But when, the federal government gives us a certain amount of money, then that's the amount that goes around. And we, again, by law are required to divide that money up amongst the 9 local workforce development areas based on an allocation formula. And the funding amount will ebb and flow. I will tell you that. So for the past couple of years that I've been doing this, the Title I funding has been being cut by about 10% a year for the adult and youth programs. The dislocated worker funds were staying pretty consistent, only going down about a percentage or so. But this year, so far, knock on wood, they're expecting to give Iowa about almost $3 million more than they did the past 2 years. Some of that might be as a result of the pandemic, although the federal government is not typically that quick to react in situations like this. So I'm not sure if that's the reasoning or what, but so it does ebb and flow. And that's a reason why the budgeting is so very important and why the cooperation and coordination amongst funding streams is so very important. But I agree with what you said, Lori. Thank you. Are there any other questions for anything that we have gone over so far? I mean, everything to date that I've discussed to this point has been really the foundation and the understanding of what we're dealing with here. And this next section will really dive into why you're here as a chief elected official and what your key tasks are. So any questions about the foundational pieces of WIOA? Okay, well, let's get into it. So we are going to go over an overview of the key tasks, and then we'll also provide you some resources and tools to continue to use in your role. So the roles and responsibilities of CEOs can really be divided into 4 categories: appointment and selection, review and approval, high-level oversight, and strategic planning. And we are going to talk about the first 3 of those today. And let's just dive into it. So this is a list of the things that we're going to be talking about. And it's not exhaustive by any means about what CEOs should do. But the first thing they should probably do, or one of the main things, is what we talked about briefly before, which is select a chief lead elected official. Again, this is just somebody to represent the group and doesn't absolve any one CEO of any responsibility or anything like that, but just somebody to help lead the group. Also, a hugely important task: appointing a local board, appointing a fiscal agent, approving a local board selection of a one-stop operator, which is a term you'll hear a lot of going forward, approving the local board budget, entering into a CEO shared liability agreement, and then providing oversight to the system and the WIOA Title I programs in collaboration with the local board. So let's get into each one of these things. So again, the chief lead elected official positions, you're going to want to select one. And most likely this has already been done in your local areas. And so your local other CEOs, your local board staff, or your local board can fill you in on who that is. But it's similar to the role of the local board chair, although WIOA does not define the chief elected officials as a board themselves. So the CLEO is selected from among the CEOs, and they're just going to represent the CEOs and make decisions on their behalf. They serve as the designated signatory for various documents associated with the local area, and the law gives specific duties to the CLIO. However, it is expected that the CLIO operates within the authority given to them by the broader group of CEOs within that CEO shared liability agreement. And so that agreement must outline the process for designating the CLIO and the decisions and the actions the CLIO can make on behalf of the CEOs. So appointing somebody a CLIO does not give them ultimate authority or decision making. You all as a group define what role that CLIO can fulfill in your area when you enter into that shared liability agreement. Oops, too far. So the next task is appointing a local workforce development board. The CLIO will appoint members to the local board and after a nomination process. And again, there are policy and procedures outlined that dictate what that appointment and nomination process should look like and how it should happen. The local board is intended to be an entity that represents the labor market within the local workforce development area. So if we go back and we think about the membership being 51% business, right? So you want those business seats on your local board to be representative of the economy in your local area. So again, if you appoint, an astronaut to sit on your local board, but there's no jobs for astronauts in your local area, that's not necessarily a good fit, right? Because these are the people that are designing the services that are needed. And so that experience and expertise is what you want driving your board. So again, because the overall purpose of the local board is to develop and implement a strategic vision for the system. So ensuring that the right composition of board members is really key, and making sure that those key sectors and industries are represented on your board will really help determine the success of the board. It's critical that the individuals appointed to the board are qualified to lead and comply with the mandated requirements of board membership. And all of those things are outlined in the law very clearly and also in state policy. We've specifically recorded a training module for CEOs to detail the overview of the local workforce development board membership categories, the criteria and other information to help the CEOs in making those appointments. So I will point you later to where you can access that information. So by law, there is a minimum membership requirement for local workforce development boards, but again, it's up to the CEOs to decide the size of the board and who all sits. All of that is really clearly defined in the law and the state policy, and also IWD's role in all of this is to provide guidance and technical assistance to you all as you make those decisions and appoint board members. So we're always here to assist as well. One of the other key tasks is appointing a fiscal agent. So you may designate an entity to serve as your local fiscal agent. If a fiscal agent is not designated, then the CLIO, so that chief lead elected official, their unit of government shall fulfill the role. So designation of a fiscal agent does not relieve the CEOs of liability for misuse of the grant funds. You're just appointing somebody to do the day-to-day fiscal management of the funds based on the guidance and decisions of the local development board and you all as CEOs. So once the CEOs or the CLIO, on behalf of the CEOs determines who the entity is it's going to serve as fiscal agent, then you would enter into a written agreement outlining the roles and responsibilities of that fiscal agent, of the CLIO, and of the board. And that's who would sign the document. It should also be noted within the fiscal agent agreement that the local board provides direction to the fiscal agent. So again, it is the board who is making the decisions and dictating the funding and how it's spent, and then the fiscal agent executes on that. So on the screen and what you're looking at on this chart, the green boxes indicate the role of the fiscal agent per regulations, and the gray boxes indicate roles that the board may give the fiscal agent. So if you put in place a fiscal agent, these green boxes are going to be the things that they have to do, but you could additionally give them additional tasks such as procuring contracts and other agreements, doing financial monitoring of your service providers, and ensuring an independent audit. So but it all has to be outlined in that fiscal agent agreement that you enter into. Again, another key task of the CEOs is to approve the selection of the one-stop operator. And so a one-stop operator's primary responsibility within the workforce system is to coordinate all the activities and functions performed by the one-stop partners. So all the partners that are in that Iowa Work Center, and to ensure that services provided are integrated and of the highest quality. So the local board has a primary responsibility for selecting that one-stop operator, but then as the CEOs, it's your responsibility to approve that selection. And that is a process that has to happen through a competitive procurement at least every 4 years. And there is guidance that is being worked on by the state right now to provide some additional technical assistance to the local areas as they do that. So this is a process that I think at this time only a couple of the local areas have already completed, and many are waiting for that guidance, which I completely understand, and we are working on it and we'll get that out soon. So if you're new, this might be one of the first things you get to kind of dive in and participate in. Okay, another key task is approving the local board budget. So the local board must develop a budget based on the needs of the workforce system, again, including both the business and individual customers. So annually, you as CEOs are going to collaborate with the local board to approve that budget. So all of the funds that are awarded to the board must be budgeted and allocated. And a fiscal agent can be designated to receive the funds for the local area, but it's the CEOs and the boards who have the responsibility for determining how the funds will be used to meet the needs of the customers. Additionally, eventually you will all enter into what's called an infrastructure funding agreement, which is defined by law and is a formal cost sharing agreement that is again, it's just required under the law. And so IWD, along with the other core partner agencies, is currently working on developing policy for those infrastructure funding agreements. So that will be something coming down the road, but it's just key to remember that you know, there are distinct roles within this system, and every role has its own lane to be in. And again, your role is in that oversight role of those funds. So approving that budget is how you do that. And so here's the one, right? The financial liability that gets people's ears to sort of perk up and say, wait a minute, what? So the chief elected officials in the local workforce development area are ultimately liable for any misuse of WIOA funds allocated to the local area. This is not a responsibility that can be waived or designated away. It can't be changed. If you select a chief lead elected official, CLEO, or a fiscal agent, it does not change the financial liability of every CEO in the state specific to their local workforce development area. It's up to you all to determine the method for apportioning that liability, and you document it in that chief of that CEO shared liability agreement. And having financial liability means that should there be a cost that is determined to be unallowed and requires repayment to either IWD or effectively to the U.S. Department of Labor, then the chief elected officials have responsibility for that repayment. And it will fall on your unit of government to make that payment back with non-federal funds. So it's not a personal liability of the CEO, but it is a liability of the county that you represent. So due to this requirement for financial liability, chief elected officials have a say in every significant financial decision made by the local board. So again, that's your budget approval, your one-stop operator selection, the service provider selection. All of this is due to the requirement, and it's you as CEOs who select that fiscal agent. And in selecting the fiscal agent, you have to ensure that the entity is fiscally sound and could fulfill all the requirements of being a fiscal agent. So for example, ensuring that the entity chosen to be a fiscal agent is able to receive and appropriately track federal funds and appropriately report on expenditures and all of those things. So that's part of the due diligence that you as CEOs would want to do before you assign that role of fiscal agent to any entity or person. with this financial liability, again, is if there were ever to be disallowed costs, that has to be repaid with non-federal funds, right? So you're looking at your county having to use additional funds to pay back those costs. And that's what makes that shared liability agreement such an important document. So let's go to the next slide and talk about that.
Hey Michelle, we have a couple questions in the chat that I think it's kind of good to just go ahead here and stop. So one of the questions is, I'm going to start with the last one first. So how does a CEO provide effective oversight since CEOs have the liability?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think we're going to hit on that again going on, but the oversight is these tasks that we're talking about that you do, so that when the local board brings you a budget, for example, for final approval, you don't just rubber stamp it. You actually understand that budget and ensure that those funds are going where you want it to go, right? That's one example. Lori, dive in here and help me if you can think of other examples. Making sure that the board, the board members themselves that have been appointed, are fulfilling the roles correctly, and that oversight is there. I'm sorry, I'm trying to blank. What am I missing, Lori?
So anytime there is a significant financial decision that the local board is going to make, the CEOs have to be a part of that. So it's, as Michelle mentioned, it's the due diligence in all of those contracting agreements. When you need to competitively procure something, ensuring that it is actually competitively procured and that you're making the best decisions on the use of those dollars. It's in one of the things that you will do is along with the local board is set policy for how money can be spent and how things can be done. And so you're providing governance and that oversight in doing all of those things that we just mentioned, plus in setting the policy. Really, every aspect of your job as a chief elected official within this system is really about everything that you're doing is providing that oversight and providing that governance. There's a couple other questions. Do you want to take them now or do you want to wait?
Sorry,
Michelle?
my mute button disappears when I'm presenting. Yeah, we can answer them now. Absolutely.
Okay. So did Michelle say we were getting more money this year compared to last year? And is the money going for the same programs or different programs?
Yes, I did say that, which is weird, right? I'm not used to saying that either. But when I'm talking about funding, I'm specifically talking about the Title I Adult Dislocated Worker and Youth programs. Those are 3 separate funding streams that will each have their own budgets. And so far, the federal government has released what they call a 10 notice that gives estimated budgets for those funding streams for the program year 2021, which will start July 1st. So to date, their estimate is that Iowa will be getting about $2.8 million more across those 3 funding streams than we did last year. Now, that was just an estimate. It's not, the be all end all decision. So we have to wait for them to give us the final guidance about what our actual allotment is for the state before we can determine, what the allotments are for each local level. But as it stands today, we are hopefully going to be getting additional funding for adult dislocated worker and youth funding streams. So that's good news.
Okay. And then there have been a couple other questions, and I think these are similar. So one question was, have the fiscal agents already been decided by the previous, it's the chief elected officials who decide the fiscal agents. And so, yes, the fiscal agents in all 9 local workforce areas have been decided. So that's not something that's on your list that you will need, that needs to get done. It's already been done, but just knowing that in your role, you all have a say in that is part of this information. But the other question around that was, somebody commented, Heather commented, so she asked how the CEO provides effective oversight, and then I don't recall having any meetings to discuss this or make choices locally, and that's Heather Stansel. I hope I'm pronouncing your last name correctly. So, Michelle, would you want to touch on those CEO conversations and when those have happened and that sort of thing?
Honestly, I think that those are great questions for you to jot down and go back to your group of CEOs and discuss with them, because I might not even be aware. I probably am not aware, quite frankly, of all the discussions that happened at the local level. So yes, typically this is something in every area. There is an existing fiscal agent agreement, which is awesome. I think that that's another, it relates back to that other question somebody asked us, how do we actually provide this oversight? So, you know, there's another great example. And I'm going to preface this by saying, I know nothing that any of the existing fiscal agents have done wrong to date. I think they're all doing a great job as far as I know. But, you know, those contracts with those fiscal agents will be up for review. Maybe this spring, maybe in another year, however long those contracts were decided, right? So another good example, in my opinion, Lori, tell me what you think, would be you don't just rubber stamp it and say, let's just extend this contract, but you actually do due diligence of like, is the fiscal agent doing what we agreed to they would do in this contract? And, you know, are we happy with their services? And all of those types of questions are things that you all could ask and answer to provide that oversight.
Absolutely.
Lori.
Yep.
Okay.
Agreed.
May I weigh in? This is Don Sims.
Sure, Don.
From experience, your contract with the physical agent, you can have that contract state that they're going to be responsible for anything that they did incorrectly or misspent. And that's part of our contract. Also, if you want to get involved in oversight, the best way to do it in our area, if you want to get involved, is to be a non-voting member of the local workforce development board and their different committees. And then you know what's going on. That's all I have. Sorry.
No,
you're good.
that's great. Yeah, thank you very much. And I had a thought to go off what you said and it completely escaped my mind. It'll come back to me eventually. Oh yeah, you made a comment about how you included in your contract that, for example, if the fiscal agent misspends funds, that they have to pay it back. I mean, that's absolutely correct, right? If $10 gets misspent, the bill does not automatically get sent to the 8 counties and divided up and you have to pay it. Obviously, you know, there are several probably contracts in between those funds getting spent and the CEOs having to pay that back with, say, county funds. The service providers, you know, it possibly could be your staff to the board if they're the ones that misspend funds. I mean, anybody that you have a contract with that is spending those funds could possibly be the first step in paying it back. When we say that you have ultimate financial liability, what we're talking about is if none of those other steps happen, you know, you can tell the fiscal agent they have to pay it back, but if they don't, and you can't get them held to that account to do it, then it would fall to the CEOs. So, you know, there are many steps before the CEOs and their counties are cutting a check to pay back funds. I would say that. So. But I think one of the biggest concerns that we had around this area the first time that we provided CEO training back in fall of 19 was, you know, well, can I just assign this away to somebody else? I mean, there is no possibility under the federal law for that liability to be given to somebody else. The ultimate liability does lie with you all, which is why we have spent so much time and effort making sure that you're educated in your roles so that you can do all of those things required to ensure that that doesn't happen, because you want to be good stewards to your county funds as well, right? And so back to the CEO shared liability agreement again. Again, this is a document. It's really designed to document and clearly line out how you all as CEOs are going to work together to accomplish all of these tasks, and how you will share liability for the funds. So the purpose of the document is really in the title of the document, right? And so, for example, I'll go back to Mississippi Valley. If you have, you know, I'm not super familiar with my geography of Mississippi Valley, but let's say Scott County has Dubuque in it, right? I know that. Or Davenport, sorry, Davenport. And Davenport is a fairly large metro area, and several of the other counties, Lee, Henry, Des Moines, Louisa, are not. They're much more rural, right? So with a local workforce development area that has 8 counties in it, you could choose within your CEO agreement to just say all 8 counties will share disallowed costs equally. So if there's a bill for $8 in disallowed costs, every county is going to pay $1. Or you could choose to say, you know what, I don't agree because my county has 1/5 the population that Scott County does. Therefore, I don't think I should have the same share as Scott County, right? And then there might be other counties that say the same thing. So that's what a shared liability agreement is about, is you all as CEOs working together to define how that liability is shared if the liability ever comes back to you at your level, at the county level. So it is an agreement that you work through together and then you sign. It's a required document to have. And in Iowa, it's additionally known as a 2080 agreement. So you might hear people reference it as that because in Iowa, it meets the definition of a 2080 agreement. So we do file them with the Secretary of State's office and have them on file as 2080 agreements as well. But under the law, what we're talking about is the CEO shared liability agreement. Did I miss anything, Lori? I kind of got off my notes, but
I think you got everything.
Okay, thank you. Okay. And so an additional key task is that providing oversight to the one-stop system, and then again, specifically those WIOA Title I programs. So you're going to do this in partnership with the local boards, and you're really providing that oversight of the entire one-stop delivery system in the area. And doing that jointly with the local boards will really ensure the system is accomplishing the vision set forth by WIOA and then locally, and then making sure you're following the regulations. And so by doing these other tasks, which is the question that was already asked, which is great, you really are providing that oversight. So, ensuring there's compliance with the local plan, that you have an MOU and an infrastructure funding agreement, that you have established a local budget, and that you're monitoring that frequently, or the staff to the board is monitoring that frequently and giving you updates so that you're on top of it and all of those types of things. So that's how you ensure you have oversight. Okay, any more questions?
This is Don again.
Yeah.
It's been my observation that if you want to be something other than a rubber stamp, you need to read all these documents that you're referring to and get acquainted with your region or your area, excuse me. And region is a bad word, by the way.
Thanks, Don.
Anyway, that would be the best way, and you need to understand these different documents and what's in them. That would be very beneficial to anybody new in this to get acquainted with this. And also, I still advise you to work with your local workforce development board as a non-voting part of their different committees, and then you really understand what's going on. Thank you.
Thanks, Don. I keep losing my mute button. Yeah, thank you very much. I mean, and I want to make sure too that anybody who's a quote unquote new CEO, that might be because you just recently won an election. Congratulations. It might be because you've been on the board of supervisors and responsibilities were switched around. So you're now this year over the workforce system and for your county and representing your board. Either way, this is something that we will be offering annually at the beginning of the year, because this is always a possibility for this change to happen, right? And so somebody like Don or Jack Willie, or I would say that they kind of came in on the ground floor, which is not really true, right? This all these requirements that we're talking through today have been in place since WIOA was put in place as the federal legislation back in 2016 when it became effective, or 2015. And even prior to that, in the federal workforce legislation prior to WIOA was WIA, and many of the very same things have been present under that legislation since 1998. What we found is, as we started to really dig in and work through some compliance issues that we received at a statewide level from the Department of Labor back in 2017, is that it had been a certain way for so long in Iowa that many of the key players, such as the CEOs, the local boards, a lot of people didn't truly understand their roles and responsibilities. So we have been working since early 2018 with mayor and mayor to really work towards fixing those compliance issues. And one of the key things that we have really learned from that is that education is the most important thing. So we started by educating the chief elected officials in the fall of 2019. And many of them had been in place. I think, Jack, you've talked about this many times, that you've been in your role as a county board of supervisors over the workforce development piece for years and have learned so much since we started really doing all of this. So don't feel like you're coming in late or anything like that. Next year, there'll be somebody new behind you. And, you know, I agree with Dawn, read the documents, work together with your peers, and you can always reach out to myself and my team for assistance as well.
Michelle?
So yeah, go ahead, Jack.
I guess what I would also say is, I'm sure most of the regions are similar to ours because, I mean, our executive director, we have training for the board, and we bring in people and they tell us about the different programs, and we have insight as to what we're doing and how we need to do it. And it's not as hard as it seems right now. There's lots of training there, so you'll understand your role within a short distance of time.
Yes, thank you, Jack. Yeah, you guys have all been able to pick up on it, you know, very quickly, and everybody's been very involved. And it's, you know, I think that the workforce system in Iowa has been all the better for it over the past couple of years and just getting stronger every day. So we will keep going and can keep improving, I'm sure. Okay, so let's talk about some tools and resources that are available to you, because this is condensed, right? This is an hour's training of your afternoon. And when we originally did this training, it was several hours long, and probably a lot of the information has been repeated. And so I just want to point out to you several resources that are available to you to come back to this information. First of all, the recording of this training will be posted online for you to view. The PowerPoint will be posted online for you to reference back to. And we also have several other documents and trainings available for you right now. So these are a list of the resources that we're going to go over in the following slides. So let me just start with a CEO orientation and training guide. So again, back in the fall of 2019, we did a cross-state tour, and I took Lori from Kentucky and I took her from Muscatine all the way to Spencer in a week across the state. And we visited all the CEOs that we could and really did this up for a week. And out of that and through the use of that training was Chief Elected Officials Orientation and Training Guide. So this is a document. It's about 60 pages long. It contains everything I talked about today and then some in an expanded version, and I think is a really great resource for you. So if you click on this link, let me just show you what you will find. And I'm going to escape out of here and take you to a PDF document. Can you still see that, Lori?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So this CEO guide is posted on the State Workforce Development Board website for you. Again, it's about 60 pages long. A lot of the same, you'll notice and recognize some of the graphics that we've talked through and a lot of the information that's available for you. So you have the ability to go out and consume this in your own time. And as always, if you do that and you have questions, I am available to help your fellow CEOs, your board chairs, your staff to the board. There are many people, but overarching is on the State Workforce Development Board website. And let me just go back to the home screen here and I'll show you where I'm navigating through. This is going to be a great website for you. So a lot of information about the State Workforce Development Board is available, but there's also a lot of information about everything we've talked about today. So here's the map of our local areas. Each local area has their own website that you can link to straight from the state board website here. But you'll also notice this CEO information link. And if you just click on that, you will be taken right to the CEO's roles and responsibilities training. There's a link to that training guide right here, and also the PowerPoint that we used back in the fall, which is a more in-depth version of the one we're using today. And you also have several training modules. So it's the content broken up into smaller sections, so you don't have to absorb, you know, a 50-minute or an hour-long training all at one time. And the other thing that's listed on this website here is what used to be called CEO office hours. We're now referring to them as local workforce development area office hours calls, but you all should have received an email invitation from me a couple of weeks ago, which is to a recurring bi-weekly meeting. It's every Friday at noon, and sometimes they get canceled, sometimes they don't. But those, I think, and I hope Jack and the others that are on that have experienced them would echo that these have been a great resource for everybody, for IWD to provide some additional technical assistance and guidance on specific topics. For the leadership of these areas is a place for them to connect and work together as peers across the state. And you can see we've posted them for the date that the content, and then some of them just say general discussion because there maybe wasn't a specific topic. Some of them really go through some specific guidance and guidelines on some specific programs or processes or things that need to happen in the local area. So this is also really a great resource for all of you, I believe. So let me get back to my PowerPoint here. And we'll go to the next slide if I did this right. Okay, here it comes. Sorry. Shoot, did I mess this up? Okay, it's still thinking once. Oh, well, what have I done, Lori?
I'm not sure. It looks like it's thinking. It looks like it's in progress.
This is probably the plight of working from home and unstable internet and all that stuff.
I would say you crashed.
Yeah, that's a
I
crash.
agree, Dawn. I think I did too. Hold on one second.
Oh no.
Oh, wait, yay. Can you see it?
Yep.
Okay, I'm back. Okay, so this was where we were. So, and I just actually showed you the link again to the State Workforce Development Board website. So when this PowerPoint is sent to you and posted, you can click right on the link and it'll take you there. There's also a link on that website, and right here in the PowerPoint presentation, the very last bullet gives you a link directly to the state plan. The state plan is a document required under WIOA for the state to submit. It's done every 4 years, and it's submitted to the Department of Labor and actually the Department of Education as well. It's really designed to outline at a statewide level a 4-year strategy for the state workforce development system. So this is a task of the State Workforce Development Board, and they really set the vision, priority, and strategies for the workforce development system as a whole. And those plans have to be approved and in place to receive federal funding. And there are 6 core programs, again, that we talked about at the very beginning. You have the WIOA Title 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then some additional core programs that participate. And this document is important to you because you also are tasked with approving the local plan, which is a smaller version of the statewide plan for your specific local workforce development area. But it does have to be written and designed within the established vision, priority, and strategies of the statewide plan. So that is a process that's probably undergoing process right now in your local areas that you'll be able to dive in and partake in. We also have a link on here to IWD's e-policy website. So this is a website that we use to post all policies related to WIOA Title I programs, and is a really great resource for you as well. And let's see here. So let's quickly talk about the contract with the fiscal agent. I got to get rid of my comments. I can't see my screen. Okay. So again, IWD will hold what we reference as a master contract or a master agreement with the designated fiscal agent of your local area. And that contract is going to be signed by IWD, the CLEO in representation of all of the CEOs, and then the executive officer of the fiscal agent entity. So again, that is how the money flows down. IWD will push the money down to the fiscal agent on behalf of the local board. But the fiscal agent should be receiving direction from the board and in conjunction with you all on how to spend those funds. So the fiscal agent is responsible for tracking the funding and reporting it back to IWD and reporting it back to the local board. And then IWD is responsible for monitoring the fiscal agent for compliance with laws, regulation, and policy. So the next steps in this onboarding process for you all is number one, probably to just decompress because this was a lot of information that came at you in an hour. But the remainder of your onboarding and orientation will really come from your local area itself. And so what you should be asking for or receiving and looking for are the following list of documents. You know, who are the other CEOs in your area and what's their contact info? Where is a copy of the current shared liability agreement? The board staff in your area or you as CEOs should probably be reviewing that to determine locally whether you decided that it needs to be re-signed if a new CEO comes on board or not. Those were all local level decisions. You probably want a current copy of the fiscal agent agreement and then information about your local board. So who are the members? What is the current budget? What are the bylaws for the local board? All of that information should be provided to you locally. So I would recommend you reach out to your local staff to the board and ask for those documents. Okay, any questions? I'll try to pull back up the comments and see what I'm missing here.
There was a comment about acronyms and they're confusing. And so the question is there a way to publish a sheet having all the related acronyms?
They sure are. And I'm pretty sure, Lori, there's a very extensive list of acronyms in that CEO training guide. Is it there?
I think so. Yep.
Yeah. So you can download that. And
oh, thanks, Heather. Heather put a link in the chat too.
Yep. Okay. Any other questions, comments, concerns, information you feel like we didn't go over very well that you would appreciate again or in a different format? You know, again, our job here at IWD is really to facilitate you all to be able to execute in your role successfully. We all share the same goal of a successful and thriving workforce development system in Iowa. And, you know, we really are here to support you in that. So anything we can do to help you, just let me know.
And this presentation is available so we can go back and rewatch it and listen to it and everything, correct?
Absolutely. So it'll probably take me a couple of days, but I will get it posted. I think this is my last slide. Let me exit out of here again one more time and not mess this up. I will post it on this CEO information page here on the state board development. So I'll probably add a section in here that the recording and also the slide deck will be available for you. Yep. Okay. Well, not hearing any other questions. I hope this was helpful. I know that this is a lot of information coming at you pretty quickly. So again, please don't hesitate to reach out. My contact information is on the PowerPoint, and I think that your staff to the board, your board chairs, most of the other CEOs probably have it as well and can share it with you. So please reach out if you ever have any questions or concerns, and I'll be more than happy to help. And I really look forward to working with you all going forward. So thank you for coming today.